Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Good morning. I welcome all listeners, and of course the panel, to the open door. Today our topic is going to be the whole range of public services and how public services can be ordered to the common good. What we're doing and have been doing the last few sessions on Friday morning is exploring the platform, plank by plank, of the American Solidarity Party, a party that's inspired by Christian principles, in particular Catholic social teaching and teaching about the sanctity of human life. And we've worked through a number of sections of the platform, and today we're looking at public services. And the preamble reads as follows. We believe that if our society is to flourish, it requires skilled and educated workers and a solid physical infrastructure. The common good is cultivated by a vigorous and responsible public sector in transportation, education, the arts, and entertainment. Now that's the preamble, and the key concept there, of course, from a Catholic perspective, is the idea of the common good. So when we're talking about public services, we're not looking to see how to make public services profitable, although that could happen. We're looking to see how the public services that we all depend on, and the front item in that list was transportation, how we can order public services to the common good. So as we look at particular items here, bullet points if you will, we want to think about each with regard to the common good. Since the service that we provide here at WCAT, and I sure hope specifically on the open door, is a service of broadly considered communication and education, I want to read just one short paragraph from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at a section of the Catechism called the use of the social communications media. The use of the social communications media, and I'm looking at, somebody wants to jot down a number for reference, paragraph 2494. Paragraph 2494. Quote, the information provided by the media, well, we're part of the media, the information provided by the media is at the service of the common good. Society has a right to information based on truth, freedom, justice, and solidarity. The information provided by the media is at the service of the common good. Society has a right to information based on truth, freedom, justice, and solidarity. Now, in past shows, we've explored the concept of the common good, hoping to bring about the reality of the common good. And I just want to check with Rhonda and Al, who I didn't introduce because they need no introduction. Al himself is in touch with operatives, one of the major parties. And Rhonda, as you know, listeners, is central to En route media. I want to touch base with them to see if they'd like to say anything before we go leaping forward to the particulars under public services. What do you say, folks?
You gonna jump in there, Rhonda?
Yes, well, whichever. You go ahead, Al.
Oh, thanks. I think those are wonderful and worthy words. The problem is, it appears that the majority of the population, which includes the operatives of the media, all have a different idea of what the common good is. We have slid from truth and justice into free love and nickel beer over the last 20, 30, 40 years. And I think I would say the national media would agree with your statement, but with this very different idea of what the common good is.
Yes. And so we need to spell it out. Well, go ahead.
Okay, for some reason these topics still bring out the devil's advocate in me more than other topics we usually discuss on WCAT radio. Maybe because it's not my field, the whole field of social and political philosophy. It's sort of a tangent to the type of ethics that I usually teach. So I haven't read enough on this to get some of these principles clear, but I'm always happy to get elucidation from Dr. James Hannant here, who has studied this much more than I have. So I have questions that always came up in my mind. We say total freedom of speech. And, you know, there's always this funny thing, well, it doesn't mean you can yell fire in the theater if there's no fire. You know, you'd go to jail for doing that. But you can have abortionists, you can have ISIS, and they have free speech. The way the TV stations are run, I think it's maybe once in 60 years that people got to see what an abortion actually was because it's banned from the networks in some way. You know, so all this stuff makes I keep having these questions about that. But on the other hand, from the other side, as soon as you would have totally government-run media, then, you know, you're on your way to Hitler and Stalin because, I mean, the first thing, if the government agency that controlled the media was mostly on the side of, you know, the agenda that says the religious people are the fanatics we have to get rid of, and we have to be free to do anything we want, and religious people can't even teach in our schools after a while and all this. They certainly can't be running radio stations. So, you know, what do you all think about that problem?
Well, we can shift at this point to the particular in the platform plank that perhaps touches most directly on the question that Rhonda poses. Actually, our panel may have, I don't know how keen they are on keeping track of these lists, they may have the list in front of them. It's the third from the bottom. And it's directed to a topic that I've heard a lot of discussion of. It reads, net neutrality so that users may access legal content without restrictions imposed by their internet service providers. Net neutrality. All right, we're using the internet. Net neutrality so that users, well, we're users and the people we hope to reach are users, may access legal content. So let's hope, and we've talked about this earlier, that excludes pornography. Net neutrality so that users may access legal content without restrictions imposed by their internet service providers. Just recently, Facebook and just recently other internet providers suddenly dropped a whole range of Catholic programming. Now they gave an excuse for having done so, and whether their excuse was legitimate or not, because of protest, that Catholic programming was reinstated. And what this platform plank point says is, if we're going to promote the common good, then communication has to be open. Now, there are going to be some legal restrictions on communication. Take the pornography question or disaster, but it shouldn't be that private companies deciding on what they want or don't want would control the whole internet. That's not going to advance the common good. On the other hand, as we know, philosophers know, Plato says, who will watch the watchman? The government rightly has a limited role to play here. It has to have some connection with internet service providers, but the internet service providers, in being accountable to the government, insofar as the government is ordered to the common good, themselves have to be ordered to the common good. And that there is no way that we can eliminate any kind of wrongdoing or coercion. There just isn't any way. But we can have a kind of system of, and this is in our tradition, checks and balances.
One of the checks and balances we have is that if we see something we don't like, we raise a stink about it. We had back in California, when I was in Santa Maria, a woman was hired, who turned out to be very sexual, was hired to run the local PBS network station. And as soon as she got the job, she immediately dropped EWTN. Well, that would have prevailed, except that there are an awful lot of Catholics in that town. We all raised a stink, and she eventually got fired, and EWTN prevailed. But only because we raised such a hoorah about her actions. If you take that to the national level, how do we control these faceless decision makers within the networks who can, unless you can find them, how can you even sue them to get your programs back on? It's a very difficult thing when you go to the national level or even international level.
It certainly is, and I think if there's a strong, independent, or if not strong, moving towards a certain strength, independent political entities such as the American Solidarity Party, it can help monitor this. We always are referring to the principle of subsidiarity. We have common good, solidarity, and subsidiarity. and there are certain public tasks that need to be accomplished that we can't do via the block club. We can't do via our parish, say. But we could have a network of parishes, and we could have a network of block clubs, and we could move to the next level. Or we could say, this whole political process at every level sickens me. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life tending my garden, which I think won't work.
Oh, yes. Well, it happens our parish priest was giving a homily about problems in the church and how far up they go. And he ended this homily by saying, nevertheless, we cannot become Catholic Amish. We have to still try to evangelize the culture.
Yes, although I think indirectly, God brings good things out of everything, including quietism. I think the Amish have done a lot to evangelize culture simply by way of their witness. But let me turn to another particular on this list. Intellectual property laws. This is number 4 on the list. Intellectual property laws that advance the public good. Now, what the dickens could that be? If you're interested in the common good, if you're interested in the right distribution of property, a lot of property nowadays is understood as intellectual properties. How could intellectual property laws advance the common good? Now, I have one thing in mind here, and maybe that will do some priming of the pumps. I work for a group called the American Maritime Association, not to be confused with the American Martini Association. The American Maritime Association, and we bring out a book every year, although usually we're a year behind. Now, one of the things that we've lately done to make the book more attractive is to have the cover be a reproduction, really, of some classical, or it ought to be classical if it's not, work of art. And I don't mean classical in the sense of Greco-Roman. I mean artwork that endures. Now, this can't be done with artwork that was brought about, created in the last century. But if you go a century earlier, all of a sudden there's a wealth of beauty there that no one has ownership of. It's in the public domain. And it could be that it's not in the public domain. It depends on what the law is, and the law bearing on what goes into the public domain and what doesn't go into the public domain is open to debate and change. So how do you propose to examine intellectual property laws? Well, what we're suggesting here is let's make sure, as much as we can, that they advance the public good, that everybody can benefit from this intellectual property without, say, denying artists their rightful livelihood. But if the artists have come and gone, and their immediate family, say, has come and gone, and maybe their intermediate family has come and gone, well, at some point, this wealth of beauty should enter the public domain. That would
okay,
be
now we have this in many ways through the web, because there are, for instance, all these not artworks, but necessarily, I don't know the laws of that, but they have all these classics, literary and spiritual classics that you can get free off the web.
Yes.
And, you know, so that seems to be like that. But then when you get to the thing of, okay, the museum that has that famous artwork, which has them on postcards for sale, can't anyone go and make in with a camera and make a photo of that same artwork? But if you're far away and you love this painting and you don't want to go from New York City to Madrid, Spain to get this, to get a copy of this, and it's online, can't anyone just take it off and blow it up and stick it on their wall?
I think in some cases they can, although in some cases you can't take something that's online off the line. You can't copy it. Now, there are various ways that museums can advance the public good in this regard. For example, I am not going to praise the life and times of J. Paul Getty. However, I am going to praise his last will and testament. Last will and testament leaves us with the Getty. Actually, there are two, but now when we refer to the Getty, we refer to the newer Getty. And in the newer Getty, the only thing you pay for is parking. The museum charges nothing. It's an enormous public good. But it need not have been that way. And I do praise J. Paul Getty for his last will and testament. I think that was an example of somebody perhaps caring so much about art and beauty that, at least with respect to art and beauty, he had the common good, the public good, very much in mind.
Now, but this is carried out by an individual as a charitable act toward the public versus it being commandeered by a government which would control all the museums. For instance, if you had a communist government, if they wanted to, they could take out all the religious paintings in every museum if they owned the museum and it wasn't a private enterprise. That's my fear.
Yes, but such a government, in many other ways, would have invalidated itself, morally speaking, because of its commitment to undermine the common good. A government that attacks religious freedom, I think, attacks the foundation of the common good, and that government might have power, but it doesn't have true authority.
Well, ISIS is a religion.
Yes.
Do we want to protect their right?
Yes, I think
their right to proselytize? I don't think so.
No, definitely not. And what we want to do is say that theology, far from being something never to be spoken of, should be spoken of. ISIS should be exposed on every level, including the theological level, beginning with, by their works you shall know them. And I think that any supposed government run by ISIS is a government in name only. I think Augustine would call it a great band of thieves rather than a government.
Yes, but our government condones the murder of all the babies in the abortion mills.
Yes. But I think what we should do then is challenge the government in that regard. Now,
right, of course, but then what am I trying to do? I'm taking each of these planks as being literal.
Yes, well,
and then I'm asking about this plank, since it doesn't formally in the plank of the party, the platform of the party, since it doesn't make these nuanced statements about freedom of religion, but only religions which don't promote terror, you know.
Yes. Well, then what we need to do is we'd have to refer back to the plank on the use of force, violence, and so forth. And I think we did at least touch on that. We have to refer back to the plank on religious freedom and what the basis of religious freedom would be. Each plank, in a way, fills out particulars of other planks.
Oh, yeah. But the thing is that since you say the party is not a Christian party as such, and it's supposed to be based on natural law, as understood by reason in a certain sense. So certainly, I mean, the religious people who believe in freedom of choice, and include abortion, the right to abortion under that, these are half the religious people in our country think that that's okay, and they think they're doing good.
I hope it's not up to half, but there are specific, strong pro-life commitments within the platform, including the view that the unborn child is a person from conception. And it's not easy to find a pro-life group that advocates that position. Most of them are.
No, but we allow religious freedom to the people who are advocating chopping up the baby in the womb, which is just as bad as ISIS.
Yeah, no, well, insofar as that religious pretext is used, the party would say, look, what we have here is a distortion of religion. Now, in order to say that, you have to say that it makes sense. We ought to discuss theology as a matter of looking at the foundation of public policy. And now, of course, you can't do that. You can, but you'd be ignored, widely ignored. And one of the things that I think is very important about the journal First Things is that it insists that if we're going to talk about public policy, we have to be theologically literate. We have to have some public discussion of that as well.
I keep thinking back to something I said a couple of weeks, or maybe 3 weeks ago, and I'm sure I doubt you can get the party to make this decision, but it seems to me if the party clearly came online as a Christian party, then you could write a much clearer and less, I'll say, squishy set of platforms. You could hit the nail right where it needs to be hit in all these matters. If you first declared yourself as a Christian party, you might get fewer members, but you would gain power in the strength of truth.
I have to check back, Al, to see just how explicit the statement of reliance on Christian principles is in the current platform. I think it's there, but I'll have to go back to check chapter and verse in that. I should have the whole of the platform right here, but I gave it away to a friend to try to entice him. I'll check with you on that next time around.
Now, but when you get into this reality that possibly I may be wrong. Oh wait, I'm getting an echo. What is that? Bob?
Bob, I don't think is with us. Maybe you're a little too close to your mic, or maybe speaking a little too loudly. I'm not sure.
Let's see. Oh, okay. Maybe that sounds better. Okay. So I don't know if you can hear me though. Can you hear me?
Oh yes, loud and clear. And
okay, very good.
I don't know why I said mic because you don't have one.
So I mean, as of now, as I understand it, most evangelical Christians who are with Catholics on pro-life are also probably would consider this American Solidarity Party platform to verge on a kind of socialism that they reject in favor of mainline Republican, sort of views, wouldn't they?
I think a significant proportion would, but that said, as far as I can tell, evangelicals are coming to be more discerning, to use a theological term, about mainstream so-called conservative policies. If you look, for example, to the head, leading figure of the Southern Baptist, what would it be? I don't know if they say Southern Baptist Confederation or Southern Baptist XYZ, but
Conference, I think it's
conference. Yes, I think that's right. The head is going back and forth with a lot of the membership about how critical to be of certain positions that a number of Republicans have supported. And the direction is not, let's become Democrats, but the direction is, let's become more gospel-oriented rather than gospel-oriented on these critical issues, but ignoring everything else. So I think there's movement. I think there's movement within evangelicals. And also, there are, as you folks know, so many different Protestant groups that when you go to talk about evangelicals, then you can start to talk about certain people that, well, they're Protestants, but they question some of the things that evangelicals say, and they're not mainline Protestants either. For example, one of the great leaders in Calvinist social thinking is a fellow named Abraham Kuyper, Kuyper. And if you look up Abraham Kuyper, you'll see extraordinary similarities between his thought and the thought of the popes from Leo XIII on. There's a shift in terminology, but it's a little bit like playing the same melody in a different key, really. And we are in regular contact with the Kuyperians, so you have to look around.
Okay, that's very helpful. That's very illuminating.
Yeah.
I have a number for you. You were alluding to all of these different churches. The last credible number I heard was there were, outside of the Catholic Church, which is all at least theoretically unified, outside of the Catholic Church, there are at least 36,000 independent churches in this country. And I'm sure the number's even higher now, but that was several years ago, 36,000. Yes. And the problem is, and the water gets really muddied in the fact that they all have their own personal opinion of what the gospel says, and so many of them are little more than tax shelters.
Which makes critics of what's called loosely organized religion all the more aggressive in trying to smoke out things. Here's an anecdote, and once we get going on anecdotes, we're in big trouble. But there is a clear interplay between theological, what could I call it, theological hyper-independence and libertarian thinking in politics. And you get a sophisticated enough history of the interplay of theology and political thought in the United States, and it will point that out. Now, here's the anecdote. Maybe the best known libertarian, not Republican, libertarian think tank, and I like to call them stink tanks, but at any rate, the best known one is something called the Cato Institute, named after Cato the Elder, who hated Carthage, and at the end of every speech said, Carthago dolenda est, whether the talk had been about Carthage or not. At the end of every speech, he said, Carthage must be destroyed. At any rate, the Cato Institute wants to recruit. What good institute doesn't? And they have a very clever way of getting you to open their envelope. First of all, the envelope is not a flat envelope. It's a little bit on the puffy side. You open it up, and there's a free gift. Very interesting free gift. Just got this 3 days ago. Very interesting free gift. It's a facsimile of the first coin minted by the fledgling United States of America. And the designer is thought to be, I guess they always are working in Providence, the designer is thought to be Benjamin Franklin. And it's pewter. It's pewter. It's not silver. It's not copper. They didn't have the money for that. It's pewter. Well, on one side, there's a sentiment that says, we are one. Well, that's not bad for the new country. Not bad at all. And you flip it over, and clear as it can be, there's another sentiment. Mind your business. So that was not a stirring call to unity.
I think that's what my mother used to tell me all the time.
Yeah. We've got BYOB and MYOB. The twin pillars of independent thought. At any rate, you have deep sources of radical individualism, and they come out in politics today as the Libertarian Party, which is growing a lot faster than the American Solidarity Party. And then you have, our emphasis on the common good, solidarity, and the recognition that you begin with the smallest units and then work as necessary to the highest units of government, and that's what subsidiarity says. But maybe I could get us off of the anecdote drift and turn to the last item on our list of bullets. It reads, last item, the public ownership of natural monopolies. Well, what's a natural monopoly? There are particulars given here, and I'm going to go right through the particulars, but then I could add to it a kind of general definition that you're likely to find among economists. The public ownership of natural monopolies, such as toll roads and bridges, community policing, we discussed that a while back, parking enforcement, public transportation, prisons, we discussed that a while back, and energy and water utilities. So those are particulars. Toll roads, bridges, community policing, parking enforcement, public transportation, prisons, and energy and water utilities. Now, what's the economist's take on a natural monopoly? Something such that, for the most part, it's not economically feasible unless one group controls it. For the most part, it's not economically feasible unless one group controls it. Because the infrastructure involved is just so massive and expensive that you can't have divided up into several different owners. You could have mom and pop grocery stores, but imagine having a mom and pop water system for the city of Los Angeles, or a local group of investors buying a freeway. Well, that's probably not going to work. On the other hand, if you say what will work, what kind of a startup will work, this is anecdotal but 100% true. Microbreweries. Anybody with maybe $5,000, nothing to sneeze at, but a lot of people have disposable $5,000, can start up a microbrewery, and a lot of people have. And it's really made a difference in the quality of beer, the active participation in the production of beer, worthwhile hobbies, and the like. On the other hand, if a bunch of your friends got together after a good day at your microbrewery and said, how's about we buy the Brooklyn Bridge? Well, that's not a good idea at all. So, public ownership of natural monopolies. Now, a number of people on the libertarian front, I think, would say, well, there's been a lot of public ownership of natural monopolies, but why don't we sell off as many of them as we can and privatize them, and let's see what happens. Now, the party, the Pelican Party, the American Solidarity Party, wouldn't say that there can't be any experimentation in privatizing natural monopolies, but it would say that there are certain public goods and public services that ought to have some sort of public direction, public ownership of. Why? Somebody may say, why? Well, you have to bring it back to the common good. The common good is not going to be served if various wealthy people buy up this freeway and somebody else buys that freeway and somebody else buys the Grand Canyon.
I'm thinking of the Postal Service now. I don't really know a lot of facts about this, but I was very surprised when you started having these other postal services competing with the public government postal service, where you can go to one of these places and they help you wrap the box and they charge you more, but you don't have to wait in line and different things like that. Is that the sort of thing you mean? Is that like a contrary?
Well, it's not contrary, but it seems to me it could very well be a real service, and it could be more than a legitimate experiment. But after they've helped you wrap the box, and after they've sold you the stamps that you might have to wait in line for someplace else, after they've done all of those things, they have to turn it over to the Postal Service in order to get it mailed. Unless you
right, but just the same, they're substituting something private to meet a need.
Yeah, it's a private.
It could be a truism. When I went to public school years and years ago, that in these socialist countries, particularly the Soviet Union, that everything had become so incredibly inefficient because it was all government, because there was no profit.
Before we get too deep in this, a little fact check here. A personal friend of mine is also a retired postmaster, and Rhonda knows him. It's anyway. He says that the businesses like FedEx and others that ilk are actually some of the best customers of the post office, but the reason being, FedEx can fly your package across the country, but they can't deliver it because they're not everywhere, and the U.S. Postal Service is. And so a lot of the income for the Postal Service is actually contract payments from FedEx and others.
Yeah, there would have to be an interplay, and I think a mixed approach is always, almost always in order, private and public, but nonetheless, the test of this would not be, well, if we privatize this, how much money can we get by doing so? And from the private sector, if we buy this, what kind of a profit can we make? But rather, let's get the private-public mix ordered with a view to the common good. The common good. Now, the common good doesn't preclude making a profit, and the common good does not emphasize. The common good does not emphasize amateurishness, so that we lack all efficiency. The common good needs efficiency as much as any other entity needs efficiency, and it needs experiments as much as anything else. But it's based on the common good being connected with subsidiarity, and subsidiarity says that some things need to be done on a larger level. They can't be done very well unless other things are done on a smaller level. And what we have to do is look always to the common good. Now, since I'm sounding like a broken record on that, I would like to, if you don't mind, read a little bit from one page of Jacques Maritain's classic, I think it's a real classic, The Person and the Common Good. And this is a buyable book, it's a readable book. It's sometimes referred to as a slender volume. Those are always my favorite, slender volumes. It runs 105 pages. But on page 52, he says this: that which constitutes the common good of political society, that's where we are, is not only, this is part of it, but it's not only, the collection of public commodities and services, the roads, ports, schools, and so forth, which common life presupposes. It's also a sound fiscal condition of the state and its military power. It's also the body of just laws, good customs, and wise institutions, which provide the nature with its structure, its tissue, you might say. And next, the heritage of its great historical remembrances. Suppose somebody says, you know, the Lincoln Monument is a pricey thing to maintain. Oh boy, let's sell it to somebody. What? Sell the Lincoln Monument? I'm sure people would buy it. Maritain continues, its symbols and its glories, its living traditions and cultural treasures. Okay, so that's a sense of how extensive the common good is. And then he continues, the common good includes all of these and something much more besides, something more profound, more concrete, and more human. For it includes also, and above all, the whole sum of these. It includes the sum or sociological integration of all the civic conscience, political virtues, and sense of right and liberty, of all the activity, material prosperity, and spiritual riches, of unconsciously operative hereditary wisdom, of moral rectitude, justice, friendship, happiness, virtue, and heroism in the individual lives of its members. For these things all are, and I'm about to end, for these things all are, in a certain measure, communicable, and so revert to each member, not the majority only, but each member, helping him to perfect his life in liberty of person. They all constitute the good human life of the multitude. Now, a number of people have commented on how much Maritain has influenced in a broad way Catholic social teaching and how much of his vocabulary is found in a number of the documents of Vatican II. And that does not suggest that somehow dogma reaches out to each and every particular social or economic arrangement. Far from it. But it does suggest that the spirit of the overall organizing principle is not Benjamin Franklin's mind your business.
I'm amazed. You went full circle and got right back to it.
Well, sometimes, and it's understandable, you look at something that has a kind of a philosophical tone to it, and you think, well, couldn't everybody agree with that? Well, they might for 5 minutes, but you push them, and they won't after 10 minutes agree with it. And then you say, what about this particular proposal? And they'll say, who would ever propose something like that? You look at what they're proposing, and you see it's very, 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 very different from what you had in mind. It's just there are a lot of steps in between.
It seems to me that the problem that all of these political parties have, including the big one, is that life is far more complex than any bullet point can grasp. And sooner or later, you've got to come back to the teaching of Scripture, of St. Paul, of Jesus, is where is the love?
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And what one might say that a mark of politics gone mad is any form of totalitarianism. And what makes for a form of totalitarianism? Any politics that would be totalizing, any politics that would purport to somehow extend to every dimension of human life. Rather, and this is pure Maritain, the state should be seen as the highest level of implementation, the topmost secretary for the people. And the topmost, best secretary for the people is following the directions of the people. It's not giving the people the outlines of where they can live and where they can't live. Government is in the service of people, and anytime government claims to be somehow the whole of life, the totally organizing factor for everything, we have something that's at the antithesis of Catholic social thinking. That's certainly the case. And it looks to me like we're winding down. I want to mention one last example here of how both social activism and political totalizing can go terribly wrong. There's a movie, and you can get it on Netflix, although I think you're going to have to shell out $3 to rent it, called Sullivan's Travels. 1941. The lead is a fellow named Joel McCrae that you might or might not remember. Well, in the movie, he's enormously wealthy, and he makes fun movies that everybody likes. And then he gets this idea that he shouldn't make a movie that everybody likes and laughs at. He should make a movie. It's 1941 that addresses the horrible and perhaps unique economic suffering of that time. And, well, people tell him, you better go on the road because you've had a privileged existence. How would you know enough to make a movie like this? So he goes on the road, and the road gets rockier and rockier and rockier. And when he hits dead bottom, he winds up in a jail. And in the jail, people are, it's the one time of delight in their lives in the jail, watching some of his movies, which were just for fun and comedies through and through. And he says, at the end of all of this, there's a place for humor. There's a place for jokes. And that's a real contribution to the common good that people overlook altogether. And what we do in the interstices, the little junctions of life, makes a profound contribution to the common good and escapes political philosophy, which isn't to say we shouldn't have political philosophy, but it's got to be ordered to the good of people, not to its own good, its own theoretical abstractionism. Balance, balance, balance.
That sounds downright Benedictine.
Yes. Didn't we once talk about
I think we did.
A certain option? Didn't we once talk about that?
Yeah, the Benedict option, yeah.
Yes. Well, the bread is rising, right? And Christians are supposed to be the yeast that helps the bread to rise. But store-bought bread isn't so good.
Right.
All right, Rhonda, can you pray us out of our usual dither?
Did we lose Rhonda?
Uh-oh, I suspect we did. And we never had Bob, and that leaves us with us.
Uh-huh.
And you're a spiritual director. Can you direct us out of our politico-economic, spiritual conundrums?
Oh, boy.
Or at least offer a prayer that we might be so released?
Okay. I think, considering the problems that seem almost unsolvable in the political arena, that we need to appeal to our Father. Our Father,
who art in heaven,
hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Next week we'll be back, same time, same station, perhaps a little bit more illumination. We'll wait and see. And once again, we encourage people to call in. And Sebastian Mahfoud, our producer extraordinaire, puts all of these shows on the web page. And don't hesitate to comment. And Scout's Honor, your comments will be answered, and you will be encouraged to join us. And I think that will be sufficient for this day. God bless one and all.
Amen.
Amen.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfoud. Good day.